Interrupt this congressional hearing, you will be removed pursuant to D.C. Code 221307. Under the code, we can ban you from attending future hearings for 1 year. Today, we are gathered to address an issue that has been weighing heavily on the hearts and minds of many, one that affects a significant portion of our aging population, anti-Semitism. This hearing is especially timely as we reflect on Passover and the time of renewal for the Jewish community and prepare to recognize Jewish American Heritage Month in May. The recent surge in anti-Semitic incidents, including harassment, violence, and vandalism, has become an alarming trend, especially impacting elderly Jewish Americans, including Holocaust survivors. These individuals, many of whom have already endured the horrors of persecution, are now facing renewed threats that re-traumatize and destabilize their lives. Anti-Semitism is not a distant historical issue. It is an ongoing reality that continues to rise in our society. I remember when my daughters were teenagers, we took them to Auschwitz and Birkenau. And you can read everything you want to read, you can go to a Holocaust museum, but going there and seeing the systemic way they just completely murdered Jews is just hard to believe, that anybody could have a lack of humanity. Older Jewish Americans overwhelmingly recognize the increasing threat of anti-Semitism. In fact, according to the American Jewish Committee's 2024 State of Anti-Semitism in America report, 96% of Jewish Americans over the age of 65 recognize that anti-Semitism is a problem in the U.S. today. More than 94% of Jewish Americans aged 50 to 64 reported an increase in anti-Semitism over the past 5 years. 43% of Jewish Americans over 50 have avoided wearing Jewish symbols or public identifying as Jewish out of fear. These statistics are not just numbers, they represent lives, families, and communities being impacted by fear and violence. This should not be happening. Beyond the statistics, elderly Jewish individuals have faced direct acts of aggression. In recent years, reports have surfaced of elderly Jewish individuals being harassed in public, attacked at protests, and even killed in anti-Semitic incidents. A Holocaust survivor in New York was spat on and verbally abused. In California, Paul Kessler, a 69-year-old Jewish man, was struck on the head with a megaphone by a pro-Hamas protester, was hospitalized in critical condition, and eventually died from blunt force trauma. That is absolutely despicable. Such incidents have highlighted concerns among older Jewish communities, particularly Holocaust survivors, for whom these events re-traumatize past experiences of persecution. In my home state of Florida, we have a large population of both seniors and Jewish individuals, so this is deeply important to me and many in my state. In our first hearing of this Congress, I outlined my priorities for the committee to ensure the wellness of American seniors and broke it down to 4 key issues: achieving physical and mental health, establishing financial stability, living in a safe community, and securing family and community support systems. If you're afraid of being targeted just because you're Jewish, how could you possibly achieve these things? If you could be attacked on the street simply because you're wearing a Star of David or a yarmulke, and you don't feel safe going out for a walk or out to the gym to exercise, do you really have strong physical and mental health? Can you really say that you're able to live in a safe community, or that you can build a community support system when you feel isolated? When you think about the true impacts that anti-Semitism or any hate has on people every single day, you realize it disrupts every part of their lives. As we face these challenges, it is crucial that we listen to those directly affected. Today, we're very fortunate to hear from remarkable witnesses whose experiences, expertise, and commitment to the safety and prosperity of the older Jewish community and Jewish community at large provides invaluable insights into this growing crisis. Their voices will help us understand how we can better protect our elderly Jewish citizens and ensure their safety in their communities. We will hear from individuals who have witnessed and lived through these horrors, including a Holocaust survivor, who will share their personal stories and perspectives. These stories are not just a reminder of our shared history, they're a call to action, urging us to stand together as a country and as a congressional body and work to eliminate the rising tide of hate. I believe that this issue is not just one for Jewish communities to address, but one that requires our collective action. This is a bipartisan issue that requires a unified response, and today we'll explore the steps Congress can take to combat anti-Semitism and protect seniors. We must act with urgency because every day that we allow hate to grow unchecked, we risk the safety and dignity of our fellow Americans, especially our most vulnerable senior population. I want to take a moment to recognize a few groups that are here today: AIPAC, the Republican Jewish Coalition, Zionist Organization of America, the Endowment for Middle East Truth, and members of George Washington University's Jewish community. I also want to recognize former Congresswoman and my friend, Eliana Ross-Layton. Thank all of you for being here, for this important hearing, for all you do for our Jewish community all over the United States. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today and working with my colleagues across the aisle to take meaningful action against this persistent threat. Now we'll hear from the Ranking Member Gillibrand.
Thank you, Chairman Scott, for holding today's hearing. It couldn't come at a more important time for our nation, for New Yorkers, for people all across this country, and frankly, people all across the globe. I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. Each of you are experts in this issue. I thank the work you do for your congregants, the work you do for your communities, and I particularly want to thank David Schaecter for giving us his personal testimony, which I can't imagine how difficult it is to tell stories like that over and over again across your lifetime. It makes a huge difference that you are here for us. Not only do American Jews feel less safe in the wake of October 7th, but I have heard from so many constituents that their anxiety levels are constantly off the charts, that there are macroaggressions and microaggressions, but the feeling of anti-Semitism and the feeling of being attacked and the feeling of being isolated is prevalent. These are not normal times, and since October 7th, we have seen violence against Jews continue to grow. We've seen incidents of anti-Semitism heighten. We've seen students on campus be so isolated and so personally attacked that they can't learn. This is not the United States that we are proud of. We need a United States that holds up the equality and civil rights of all of its citizens. And by speaking out today on these issues of anti-Semitism, we are creating a record about what is happening and what needs to be done. Now, we know that people who have survived decades and decades of violence and anti-Semitism have experienced the worst kind of anti-Semitic hate and violence. We have used the phrase never again. But do we really mean never again? We use the phrase never forget. But have we really meant never forget? And what happened on October 7 is the most egregious nightmare, the most disgusting, horrific, inhumane, barbaric attack that I've ever heard testimony about or seen video footage of. Satanic, evil, disgusting. We witnessed what happened in 2018 with the Tree of Life Synagogue. Worshipers, people in their safety of their own religious community, the safety of their synagogue being absolutely destroyed by someone who had murder and evil on their mind. Many of the victims were older adults who could not flee, who could not walk quickly, who could not take cover. Federally funded activities like the not-for-profit security grant program, which helps organizations like synagogues and churches and places of worship secure their buildings, hire security personnel, have barriers. That money is essential, and we have to continue to fund that program to its fullest. We have to work in Congress to provide top-down policies and resources that promote learning, allow for the effective prosecution of hate crimes, and empower law enforcement and communities to strengthen the ability to protect our neighbors. As a mom with college-age children, I can tell you, no campus should be unsafe for people because of what they believe, because of their faith, because they are Jewish. And so I call on every college campus to prioritize the safety of its students, and I think accountability is important. I do not agree that taking away NIH funding or research funding is the right approach, but I will stand with the students to make sure that these college campuses are safe no matter what. I look forward to the testimony of these witnesses. I thank the chairman for holding such an important hearing, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Ranking Member Gillibrand. I'd like to welcome our witnesses today, all of whom bring important perspectives on the challenges facing the elderly Jewish population in light of the rise in anti-Semitism. We are honored to be joined by Miami-Dade County Sheriff Rosie Cordero-Stutz, who has been a powerful force and an important voice in the fight against anti-Semitism in South Florida. As two of her constituents are serving as witnesses before the committee today, I'd like to recognize Sheriff Rosie to introduce her fellow Floridians from Miami-Dade County, Mr. Dave Schaecter and Rabbi Mark Rosenberg. Sheriff.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Rick Scott, Ranking Member Kirsten Gillibrand, and members of the Senate Special Committee on Aging. Thank you for inviting me to introduce Mr. David Schaecter, who is a Holocaust survivor and president of the Holocaust Survivors Foundation USA and founder of the Holocaust Memorial on Miami Beach. David has devoted countless hours to educating students nationwide and advocating on behalf of the Jewish community about the horrors of the Holocaust and the anti-Semitism wave worldwide. We will not allow your story and the 6 million innocent lives lost to be forgotten, ever. I would like to thank David's wife, Sydney, for traveling with him to be here today. It is a true honor to introduce you to you. David Schaecter, you may begin your testimony.
Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Gillibrand, members of the Aging Committee. My name is David Schaecter. I'm 95 years old and a proud American and a proud Jew and a survivor of 2 Nazi concentration camps. I'm a witness to the greatest act of anti-Semitism, where 6 million Jews were killed for no other reason other than being a Jew. I was born in a small town in Slovakia, Czechoslovakia, in 1929. In 1940, my father was taken away from our family by the government. That was the last time I saw him. A year later, I was 11 years old. The rest of my family were rounded up and placed into train cattle cars. The car fit more than 50 people, and they put in 80. There was nowhere to sit. We couldn't only stand or fall on top of each other. Sanitary facilities were limited to 1 bucket. Approximately 25% of the people were dead or dying when we arrived at Auschwitz. When we arrived at Auschwitz, the Nazis separated us. My mother was holding the hands of my 2 little sisters, Leah and Marianne, when they were taken away. This was the last time I saw them. Someone told my brother Jacobo to have me stand on his feet to appear taller, and I did at 11 years old. I was shaved bald and given a tattoo on my right arm. We were assigned to a work detail. We rose every day at 6 a.m. and walked 2 to 3 kilometers to our jobs, cleaning the rail cars that we arrived in. The floors were covered with human feces, urine, blood, and corpses. I still smell the taste of filth and the chemicals we had to use. The Nazis were not selective on how and who they beat or who they killed. Yaakov, my brother, would take a beatings meant for me, and he shared his food with me. And he did small things to help me survive. For example, the grease canister for the axle of the trains were as big as me. Yaakov tried to get smaller canisters of grease for me to carry. Yaakov and I were in Auschwitz for more than 2 years before being transported to Buchenwald in Germany, Nazi Germany, in 1943. I was about 13 years. By this point, the war was not going well for the Nazis. I remember the air I was breathing was horrendous. It was the smell of burning flesh and smoke. We knew what the Nazis were doing. They also poisoned the water pipelines. We knew to boil the water pipelines to keep from getting sick. One day I saw Jacob, my brother, drinking the water without boiling it. I didn't want to live anymore, he said. The next day he was sick and dysentery, frail and weak. They marched us to work, but I could not pull him up, and I could not stop because the guards pushed his gun beside my head. I let go of Yaakov, and he just laid there. And he continued, and we continued. About 10 seconds later, I heard the sound of a gunshot. I knew they had shot him, and I never saw Jacobo after that. After almost a year, around November of 1944, I was placed on another rail car along the route near Passau, Bavaria. The U.S. Air Force bombed the train. I was alone without my brother to protect me. But I jumped out of the train car and I ran like hell to the forest. After 8 days, I was found by the Czech partisans. I was almost 15 years old and weighed 83 pounds. After recovering at the hospital at the end of the war, I returned to my hometown. I had hoped to find comfort, but instead I found more anti-Semitism. I had to hide in a barn on a family farm before making my way back to the train station back to go to Prague. Other Jews that returned had been killed. Many years before I learned my father had survived this Mauthausen concentration camp. It was actually a salt mine, but had died 3 days after the liberation of typhoid. Before the war, we lived on a farm that was in our family for 7 generations. I had lost 105 family members, siblings, aunts and uncles, and cousins, all murdered. Our land was taken, and I was an orphan. I came to America in 1950. I learned English in 9 weeks and went to college. Upon graduation, I married and started a family. Today, I have 2 children and 5 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren. I wish I could say that anti-Semitism stopped after World War II, but it rages on. On October 7, 2023, we saw Hamas kill 1,195 Jews. It's been over 570 days, and we still have hostages. These atrocities are and were barbaric, to say the least. Were traumatizing to survivors. Barely scratches the surface. Protests on college campuses that intimidate and threatens Jewish students are not being and cannot be ignored. I remember vividly when Slovakian classmate taunted Jewish kids like me, and what's happening today looks like and feels like the same. The most recently in Pennsylvania, governor's residence were burned by arsonists during Passover. I spent my days going to school, talking about my experience, teaching children about dangerous anti-Semitism. 18 states in the United States, including Florida and New York, have law requiring Holocaust survivors. Shows widespread ignorance about the Holocaust, especially among U.S. millennials and GC. And we must do everything possible to educate our young people of the subject of restitution. We survivors have been pressing for years to ensure restitution of looted assets, such as stolen art, which is critical, documenting the realities of the Holocaust. That is why survivors and our families strongly support amendments to HERE Act and other legislation that will enable families to recover their property from those who still want to profit from the Holocaust. This is also important because part of Shoah terrible legacy is that for the past several decades, nearly half of all the survivors lived and died in poverty without the adequate food, medicine, or home care. Survivors suffer from extreme physical and mental health challenges due to the long-term effects of starvation, beatings, disease, malnutrition, and the murders of our loved ones. I am here reminding everyone that there is still thousands of survivors alive today who are in desperate need and who cannot be forgotten. Thank you for having this hearing on anti-Semitism. It has been a problem, and God Almighty, it still is a problem. Thank you.
Now, I'd like to welcome my dear friend and fellow Floridian, Rabbi Mark Rosenberg, who is my senior advisor as well as a senior chief chaplain of the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office. He is also chief chaplain of the Florida Highway Patrol and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Rabbi Rosenberg has dedicated his life to serving the Jewish community, especially in times of crisis. Particularly, Rabbi Rosenberg was a passionate voice of hope and comfort during the Surfside Tower collapse back in 2021, where 91 lives were tragically lost. His leadership in Florida has helped to bridge the gap between law enforcement and Jewish communities, ensuring that cultural competency and safety are priorities in dealing with acts of hate. Thank you for being such a strong voice for the Jewish community in the state of Florida. You may begin your testimony.
Thank you, Sheriff. Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Gillibrand, members of the committee, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to speak on this pivotal issue. As a law enforcement chaplain and director of Chesed Shel Emes, I work with many in the aging population, particularly during end-of-life crises. The rise of anti-Semitism is an issue that is discussed far too often, as people are genuinely concerned about their safety in this online cesspool of hate. When hate is allowed to simmer, it spills into the streets, confirming people's worst anxieties. But there's one group whose fear is more palpable than others: the elderly. The aging population held on to the hope that the hatred they witnessed in their youth was a subject of history, a burden they need not and should not pass on to their descendants. So they stayed silent. Why stress their children and grandchildren if the present reality doesn't reflect the trauma of the old world? But on October 7th, the elderly saw their grandchildren slaughtered for being Jewish. They came face to face with the horrific news that the past they thought they left behind will be the future. Perhaps the burden they thought was unnecessary to carry was just an illusion, and the iron grip of evil will once again take hold of the world. Why do the elderly have more trepidation than everyone else? Because they've seen this movie before. They know how this starts. They saw Jews barred from colleges and Jewish businesses boycotted in 1933. Are we not seeing the same in 2025? The Holocaust didn't start in 1941. The tracks to Auschwitz were laid much earlier. I'm not claiming there will be another Holocaust in 9 years, but if we're being honest, the Holocaust didn't start in the 1900s. It was the conclusion of anti-Semitism that had fermented for centuries. After the war, the elderly thought that the Holocaust was the final chapter in the story of anti-Semitism. They believed the greatest country in the world had given them and their descendants unprecedented freedom. That is why they raised their children in the United States without passing on the trauma of their youth. But now the aging population is not just worried about the anti-Semitism of the grandchildren face today. They fear that the country that gave them freedom of religion could be overtaken by a sinister agenda. If you had asked them before October 7 whether a Holocaust or a Spanish Inquisition could ever happen again in America, the answer would be a resounding no. But now, such an assertion seems far less certain. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but perhaps one day. What happens in 40 years when college campuses is the new government? They never thought they would see this movie again, but here we are at the opening scene. The question is, will we drive the train off its tracks before it reaches Auschwitz? I know this sounds intense, but these are the very real concerns of the elderly. After all, who knows the movie better than they do? What will calm their fears? Consequences before it's too late. If my child runs into the street and I remain silent, I may not support it, but I can guarantee it will happen again. If there are no consequences for those who intimidate and bully under the guise of free speech, they will be emboldened to take more ground until we reach a dark place. For too long, people filled with hate had left safe enough to show up at synagogues, educational facilities, and public spaces spewing hate and anti-Semitism. They've bullied, intimidated, harassed, terrorized, and threatened in the hope of provoking a reaction. In Florida, the laws halt such acts and provide consequences for those who harass based on religion or ethnicity, and even imposes felony charges. If we take legitimate action, we can stop hate and anti-Semitism before it spirals out of control, as it has so many times in history. Winston Churchill famously stated, "The farther backward you can look, the farther forward you are likely to see." Now, evil will always have a home in the human psyche. The question is not whether we can eliminate it, but what those in power will do to stop the spread. We can show our aging population that trauma will not be the grandchildren's burden. We can show them that America is not just the land of the free, but also the land of the consequences. So in conclusion, we must accept that never again is now. We must accept that silence enables those who hate. We must accept that the aging community is reliving the trauma that should have never happened, let alone forgotten. We must accept that Holocaust deniers exist, and we cannot deny their existence. We must accept that the atrocities of October 7th, murder, rape, burning of families and babies actually happened, and we cannot allow these crimes to be suppressed. We must accept that 250 hostages were taken, including Holocaust survivors, and many are still waiting for the grandchildren to be returned from the Hamas terrorists. And we must guarantee the elderly that the world they are leaving their children is better than the one they found. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank each of you. First off, Sheriff, thank you for the introductions. Mr. Schaecter, thank you for your powerful testimony. Rabbi Rosenberg, thank you for your testimony. Next, we're pleased to welcome former Congressman Mr. Ted Deutch from the great state of Florida, the CEO of the American Jewish Committee. Mr. Deutch brings invaluable experience in advocating for Jewish communities, including his work here in Congress, where he was instrumental in pushing for legislation to combat anti-Semitism. Under his leadership, the AJC continues to be a leading voice for Jewish Americans in the fight against rising hate and discrimination. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to hearing your testimony.
Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Gillibrand, members of the committee, I'm honored to be here alongside my distinguished fellow panelists, especially my dear friend David Schaecter. I want to thank you, first of all, for giving us the gift of David's testimony. I am the CEO of American Jewish Committee, a global nonpartisan advocacy organization that stands up for Israel, that confronts anti-Semitism, and that upholds the democratic values that we cherish. I note that in this committee's history, there has never been a hearing on anti-Semitism. This hearing, unfortunately, is both necessary and historic. I thank the chairman and ranking member for holding this hearing, and I applaud your commitment to tackling anti-Semitism in a nonpartisan and bipartisan manner. Earlier this year, AJC released our annual State of Anti-Semitism in America report. The top lines are startling. 73% of American Jews feel less secure than they did a year ago. 56% have changed their behavior because of fear of anti-Semitism. In short, your constituents are deciding not to be openly Jewish because they fear they will be targeted. That's not the America any of us want. And of the 1.6 million American Jewish seniors, including more than 30,000 Holocaust survivors, 43% are worried that they will be victims of anti-Semitism, and more than half worry that their loved ones will be. And they have reason to worry. They see anti-Semitic hate online. They saw posters of Holocaust survivors torn down just last week in New York. They hear from their grandkids about campus anti-Semitism. It doesn't matter who is targeting Jews, whether it is the far left or the far right. For us, the hatred and the fear are the same. Anytime a Jewish person is under threat, it affects every Jew because we're all interconnected. But rising anti-Semitism isn't just a Jewish problem. It's a crisis for our democracy and our society. Anti-Semitism divides us. It weakens our social cohesion. It impedes our ability to solve the challenges that we face. This moment demands bold actions from our leaders. So what can Congress do to fight anti-Semitism at its roots? Well, In order to fight the foundation of anti-Semitism, we have to stamp out misinformation about the Jewish community. We do that by educating people about the Holocaust and about anti-Semitism. AJC's Translate Hate is one such resource. Building off the success of the reauthorization of the Never Again Education Act, we also urge Congress to pass the HEAL Act, to direct the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum to ensure that every student in America understands why we say never again. To counter the scourge of anti-Semitism that has rocked campuses and classrooms across the country, we urge Congress to pass the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act and the Protecting Students on Campus Act. Both are bipartisan bills that would help identify anti-Semitism and empower students to report Title VI violations they experience. We urge Congress also to work with the Trump administration and support the Department of Education Office for Civil Rights, including by providing at least $162 million in the FY26 appropriations process. I also point out that closing more than half of the OCR regional offices and cutting the number of Title VI investigators means that fewer cases will be investigated and thoroughly and timely dispensed with. Students deserve to know that the federal government will be there for them and will step in when their rights are violated. In order to combat the inferno of online anti-Semitism, we urge Congress to consider targeted and narrow reform of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act to tackle online anti-Semitism that leads to violence in the real world. And social media companies should enforce their own rules meant to prevent harassment and hatred on their platforms. It's also imperative to protect the Jewish community from the threats we are facing now, and we urge Congress to immediately work with the Trump administration to unfreeze vital funding associated with the nonprofit security grant program and provide necessary funding so that the security needs of nonprofits like synagogues and Jewish community centers are met. And finally, to best guarantee these efforts are as effective as possible, we urge Congress to work with the Trump administration to counter anti-Semitism by taking a whole of government approach in its fight. And just as we fight anti-Semitism and protect the Jewish community, so too must we lift up the voices and lived experiences of Jewish Americans. Tomorrow marks the start of Jewish American Heritage Month. Congress should codify this month into federal statute to ensure that the contributions and sacrifices that Jewish Americans have made to our country are celebrated every year. And I urge each of you and all of your Senate colleagues to recognize Jewish heritage, Jewish life, and Jewish contributions to American society during the month of May. Meet directly with Jewish constituents, hear their stories and their experiences. Understand that our contributions to America, our lives in America, contribute to the richness of our diversity and the greatness of our nation. My father, the late Bernard Deutch, who earned a Purple Heart fighting the Nazis at the Battle of the Bulge, always taught us that we are Jews and we are Americans, and we couldn't be more proud to be both. Jewish seniors, those who have done so much for our nation, deserve to live out their remaining lives, celebrating their family and community, and observing their faith openly without worrying if their children or grandchildren will be victims of anti-Semitism. They deserve the freedom that is promised to them and every American. And AJC looks forward to working together with all of you towards safeguarding that foundational promise for our seniors whose contributions and whose sacrifices have built the America that we are all blessed to live in. Thank you again for having me.
Congressman, thanks for being here. Thanks for your testimony, and thanks for what you do. Now I'd like to recognize Ranking Member Gillibrand to introduce the next witness.
Thank you, Chairman Scott. I want to introduce Rebecca Federman. Ms. Federman serves as the Senior Director of the Intelligence Desk for the Community Security Initiative in New York. In this capacity, she manages the intelligence collection, monitoring, and investigations related to the safety and security of New York's Jewish community. Ms. Federman works closely with law enforcement partners in both state and federal agencies to provide critical intelligence on known threat actors and impending threats. You may begin.
Thank you, Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Gillibrand, and members of the Special Committee on Aging for inviting me to speak with you today. My name is Rebecca Federman, and as Senator Gillibrand mentioned, I am privileged to serve as the Senior Director of the Intelligence for the Community Security Initiative of New York, or CSI. In 2019, in the wake of the deadliest attacks against American Jews, 15 Jews murdered in 14 months across Pittsburgh, Poway, Jersey City, and Muncie, many of whom were elderly individuals, the umbrella Jewish organizations in New York founded CSI as our way of actualizing Never Again. CSI is a comprehensive program designed to protect and enhance security for the 1.8 million Jews in New York and Southwest Connecticut. We help ensure Jews are never again murdered in our synagogues, schools, or grocery stores. I lead our intelligence desk, a team of 4 analysts whose main goal is to detect, investigate, and disrupt violent threats targeting the Jewish community. The investigations we undertake are politically and ideologically agnostic. We've thwarted violent neo-Nazis, ISIS-inspired individuals, and other variants of anti-Semites with weapons. We spend our days knee-deep in the sewers of the internet, scouring it for threats. It is important to note that our focus is not on the albeit vile, but nevertheless First Amendment protected anti-Semitic speech, but rather on credible threats that meet a higher threshold, including an explicit expression of violent intent, such as "I'm going to shoot up a synagogue," an indication of possessing weapons with intent to use them, or an expressed allegiance to a US-designated terrorist organization. In 2024 alone, we elevated a total of 221 life-threatening instances to law enforcement and partner organizations at home and abroad. This is undeniably a profoundly disturbing number. Just 2 months ago, one of my analysts detected a post on X in which the user indicated his intention to visit Central Synagogue, a prominent synagogue in Manhattan, naming the exact location, date, and time. In a subsequent post, he evoked Adolf Hitler and pledged to kill tenfold as many Jews if he was stopped. Working closely with the NYPD and New Jersey State Police, the individual was intercepted as he was en route to New York City. This is but one of many examples of the threats the CSI team has helped to thwart. Based on our analysis, the most acute threats against the Jewish community today stem from 3 main sources: individuals radicalized by the current Israel-Hamas war, ISIS-affiliated or inspired actors, or those fueled by white supremacist and neo-Nazi beliefs. Indeed, recent plots corroborate our triple threat assessment. In July 2024, a Canada-based ISIS supporter planned a mass casualty attack against Chabad's world headquarters in Brooklyn. In January 2025, based on a tip from CSI, a white supremacist in Massachusetts was arrested with weapons and a Nazi flag after he posted online that it was time to kill Jews. And of course, as David said, just a few weeks ago, Governor Josh Shapiro's home was firebombed during Passover, an act allegedly motivated by the governor's pro-Israel stance. A large-scale attack like one of these is not the only threat. Every day, Jewish Americans are victims of anti-Semitic incidents that range from vandalism and harassment to assault. Just last week, the Anti-Defamation League released its 2024 audit of anti-Semitic incidents, recording a record-breaking 9,354 incidents. Assaults increased by 21%, and 58% of the incidents contained elements of anti-Israel bias, perpetrated by both anti-Israel organizations and individuals and white supremacist groups. Particularly concerning is the 84% increase in anti-Semitic activity on college campuses. Since October 7th, Jewish students face intimidation, harassment, and disruptions to campus life. In response, CSI launched our Campus Security Initiative, working with campus Hillels, Chabad rabbis, and campus security professionals at 25 universities from Boston to Washington, D.C. We provide everything from event security funding and personal safety apps for students to weekly intelligence reports detailing trends, incidents, and upcoming protests. While not all campuses have seen the same level of disturbing activity, what we are witnessing on some is no longer mere protesting. At George Mason University, a student plotted an ISIS-inspired attack on the Israeli consulate in New York City. At the University of Pittsburgh, Jewish students were assaulted during a demonstration. And at Columbia University, Jewish students have been spat on, shoved, and chased off campus by mobs chanting, "We don't want no Zionists here." This is not activism. It is dangerous and growing more brazen by the day. To address the rise of anti-Semitism for the entire community, including the elderly, CSI recommends the following: increased funding to $500 million for the Nonprofit Security Grant Program, the passage of the Antisemitism Awareness Act, and a fully funded Office for Civil Rights within the Department of Education to effectively and efficiently investigate Title VI complaints. Thank you for your bipartisan leadership in fighting anti-Semitism. I look forward to your questions.
Ms. Federman, thank you for your testimony. Thanks for what you do. Thanks for the lives you've saved. So thank each of you for being here today. Now we're going to go to questions. So let me start with Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of you for being here and your heartfelt statements. Very, very much needed. Before I start my questions, I want to read a statement here from a good friend of mine. His name is Coach Bruce Pearl, who is currently in Jerusalem and will be there for a couple of weeks. He would have loved to have been here. Shalom from Jerusalem. I'm an American Jewish college basketball coach visiting my ancestral homeland. Yesterday was Israel's Remembrance Day. Today is Israel's Independence Day. This is a very emotional time for everyone here because this country has been at war since birth. Hours ago, I left Knesset, where I was in attendance along with Prime Minister Netanyahu, President Herzog, and about 1,000 citizens honoring the fallen. I'm angry. I'm very angry. What I would ask of this committee is the courage to speak to our educators. We must teach our children. I'm very proud that in the state of Alabama, we have mandatory Holocaust education for middle school students. If we choose not to teach them, somebody else will. None of us can explain. They can explain it or understand why the Jewish people have been targeted. We have to do two things. We have to protect ourselves from those who want to kill us, and we have to try to live exemplary lives so that maybe the uncertain won't hate us. Our educational institutions want to stay neutral, leaving our young people to find out the truth on their own. I am proud to be an American. This country saved my family's life, rescuing my grandfather from turnip hole in 1929. I will be forever grateful. God bless. Coach Bruce Pearl, Auburn University. The issue we're seeing today on college campuses, and this is from me, is being reinforced by the culture and values being taught on all the campuses. Good people in this country are being taught that Palestinians are the freedom fighters and the people who are being oppressed. They are being taught that the facts on the ground of the Middle East are not true. Why is this happening on university campuses? It's the same reason why our players would kneel for our flag and the national anthem, because they're not being taught to love this country. They've been taught that they're oppressed. They have not been taught to love and appreciate the opportunities this country gives them. They have not been taught what's really going on in the Middle East. Young people want to have a cause, and they have now chosen to stand against freedom because of lies and propaganda. So, Congressman, we have unfortunately seen anti-Semitic attacks spike since October the 7th. Hamas terrorist attack. Many of the victims of these attacks have been elderly Jewish Americans. How can the United States government better protect its citizens, particularly the elderly, from such attacks?
Senator Tuberville, thank you. First of all, I appreciate your reading that statement from Coach Pearl, who stopped at the AJC Global Forum in New York on his way to Israel. We, as I'm sure you are quite proud of his leadership on these issues. There is an enormous amount that the Congress can do. It's important, though, to emphasize that facts really matter here, and what you said is so important. Some of the protests that we saw, the ones that happened on October 8th and 9th, were not protests about anything that Israel was doing. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, hadn't even gone into Gaza yet to defend the people of Israel and the Jewish people. The people who took to the streets immediately called to the streets with signs that had a terrorist and a hang glider as their call to action, were there to do one thing, which is to support the Hamas terrorists who slaughtered 1,200 Jews and whose goal is the destruction of Israel and the massacre of Jews. Congress can play a vital role both in helping to keep seniors, Jewish seniors, and all Jews safe by focusing on security and nonprofit security grants. Congress can play an important role in helping everyone understand and identify what anti-Semitism actually is for those who don't spend time thinking about this the way that we believe the country should, in passing the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. And we think that Congress can play a really vital role in making sure that on those campuses, that when the civil rights of Jewish students are violated, when anyone's Title VI rights are violated, that the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Education has the funding necessary to actually conduct the investigations and hold those who committed these acts accountable. Accountability matters. On campuses across America, Jewish students have the right to speak out and feel safe like every other group on campus.
Thank you. Rabbi, I am proud that we now have the most pro-Israel and pro-Jewish president of my life back in the White House. President Trump has made it clear, if universities continue allowing anti-Semitic propaganda on their campuses, they will lose their federal funding. Outside of this, what steps do universities and school administrators need to take to put an end to all this?
Well, firstly, they need to follow the law, and I hope that if the law is on their side, why don't we see college campuses go rob 14 stores every day? Why don't we see iPhones, Android phones go missing every day? Why? Why don't the 7-Elevens around the colleges don't have a problem with people coming into the stores? Because there is law and order. And I strongly believe that if what my friend Ted over here said, that if we do that, we're not going to have an issue. If people are taught to love like young children, they need to know what's right and what's wrong. And right now, it's right. It's a movement. It's a cause. And I've been to college campuses myself. And, you know, for 40-plus years, I grew up in upstate New York. I never experienced anything whatsoever. We all got along. Now, at this time of my life, I have to walk into college campus and feel weird that I'm wearing a yarmulke. I don't feel that I'm going to be robbed. I feel that I'm going to be identified because I'm a Jew.
Thank you. My time is up, but I appreciate y'all coming and speaking the truth. And as my buddy and fellow coach Bruce Pearl would say, I think one of the biggest answers to this question is education. We need to educate people the right way. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you. Ranking Member Gillibrand.
Thank you. Ms. Federman, in 2024, New York led the nation in reported anti-Semitic incidents with over 1,400 reported. These incidents are not isolated. They reflect a broader, deeply troubling trend of rising anti-Semitism in the nation. The not-for-profit security grant program, which has been instrumental in helping at-risk communities, particularly Jewish institutions, helps to bolster the safety and security of these institutions. Congress recognized the importance of this program by increasing funding to $305 million in the fiscal year 25 Senate Appropriations Bill, and they approved an additional $400 million in funding through the fiscal year 24 National Security Supplemental. Even with this increased funding, the not-for-profit security grant program is oversubscribed and less than half the applicants receive the funding they need. Ms. Federman, can you please speak about the importance of this program and why you recommend appropriating at least $500 million for it?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. Jewish community institutions are often the sources of Jewish life in a community, including synagogues, schools, and community centers. And they are increasingly targets of harassment, vandalism, violent threats, whether it's bomb threats, whether it's swastika graffiti, or something more nefarious. In 2023, despite the $274.5 million that were funded in appropriations, only 43%, less than half of grant applications were funded. And this leaves a significant number of at-risk institutions without access to critical security enhancements. Expanding this investment in the same way will ensure that vulnerable nonprofits, synagogues, churches, et cetera, will have the necessary resources to harden potential targets, train for emergency scenarios, and protect their communities for those who seek to do them harm. And if I may just give an example as to how imperative these grants are and the work they actually do. In May of 2024 in Brooklyn, an individual attempted to run over Jewish students at a religious Jewish school in Brooklyn. He drove his car up on the curb, saw students outside, and tried to run them over. Now, they received NSGP funding, and we have helped them put up a fence. And this is going to ensure that never again will their students be at risk in the same way from a vehicle ramming attack. And so it is imperative that NSGP is funded further.
Thank you. You also mentioned in your opening remarks CSI's Campus Security Initiative, where you work with Hillel and Chabad to ensure their security. Throughout this work, what have you learned about the Jewish community on campus's need to help mitigate the effects of anti-Semitism on campuses? Have there been any policy decisions made by campus administrations to help address these incidents?
Yes, so on a tactical level, campuses have asked us for extended funding for events, security guards in place, particularly for events about Israel featuring Israeli soldiers, individuals that tend to be targeted, or large-scale holidays, right? A Passover Seder, Rosh Hashanah services. And we've also actually provided, and this came directly as an ask from the rabbis, from their students, because they felt unsafe, we provided students with escorts to and from their dorms on Passover of last year because they were so concerned that they would be assaulted, harassed on their ways to and from. But in a general sense, students just want the ability for normal campus life. They want to be able to attend classes, whether about the Middle East or on otherwise innocuous subjects, and not feel that they can't speak their mind, they can't be Israeli in school. They want to be able to walk through campus without being subjected to vitriol, and they want to be able to go to their Hillels and Chabad houses and feel safe and secure there. In terms of policy decisions that campus administrators can make, we've actually seen a success at NYU. They have, since the spring of 2024, when all of the encampments were popping up, they changed their code of conduct to include the term Zionist as a dog whistle. We know that very frequently someone will use it instead of saying Jew to sort of allege they're not anti-Semitic, but NYU has explicitly changed their code of conduct, and it says if you are going to use coded language, if you're going to call for the death of Zionists, if you're going to exclude Zionists from a campus event or a place on campus, that then violates their code of conduct, and they're able to.
And I would argue all of those are incidents of anti-Semitism.
Correct.
Congressman Deutch, can you talk a little bit about the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act and how this act could enhance the federal government's ability to enforce Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, particularly in educational settings, and why it's imperative that the Senate has to pass this legislation and provide clear, actionable definition of anti-Semitism to the federal government. And also, and I know I'm out of time, but can you just talk a little bit about why we should be supporting more Holocaust education programs in the United States? Since a lot of our students, 12% of U.S. millennials and Gen Z have never heard or don't think they've ever heard the word Holocaust before.
Sure. Just really quickly on your second point, Senator Gillibrand, I mean, the answer is here with us. The reason that kids need to learn about the Holocaust is because as fewer and fewer survivors are able to share their stories directly, we have to help provide that education. Every student in America should hear what David Schaecter shared with us today. The impact that has to change the way they view the world and understand what can happen when anti-Semitism, when hate goes unchecked. That's why that's so critically important. As far as the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, it's critical to have a standardized definition of anti-Semitism. And the IRA definition is an educational tool. And it's meant to inform policymakers and police and prosecutors, judges to understand what anti-Semitism can look like. It's not a speech code. I want to disabuse people of that idea, something that we've heard a lot about over the past couple days. It's not a speech code at all. It's meant to help people identify what speech that is anti-Semitic looks like so that policymakers have the ability to decide how to combat it. Because the question isn't whether or not anti-Semitic language is acceptable. It's not whether it's protected speech. It's whether it's something that we should simply allow to continue, that can lead to the kinds of instances that we've been taught, all of us here have been talking about on this panel. It's a really important tool in that fight, and it's a tool that policymakers should have, and that they will when Congress passes the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ranking Member. Let's start with Mr. Schaecter. As a Holocaust survivor, you've experienced firsthand the horrors of anti-Semitism. How has the current rise in anti-Semitism in the U.S. impacted you personally, and what do you see as the greatest threat to elderly Jewish Americans today?
Well, I don't know how to describe age. And these elderly, I don't think they possess the same stamina that I have at being 97 almost. But I don't want to be measuring what makes a guy understand when he is trying to escape, he's trying to avoid, and he's trying to not be the guy who gets it all, and who's the victim. And I for one, I speak to youngsters, I speak to children. I beg them to look at me. And do they think that I'm someone to be scared of? And they say no. So if the children say no, why should grown-ups go ahead and have the right to demean and the right to attack the helpless and the ones who are the mostly the nicest of all-time people?
Thank you. Rabbi Rosenberg, you've worked extensively with law enforcement in Florida to bridge the gap between Jewish communities and those who protect our streets. You've also been deeply involved in cultural competency training with law enforcement. How well equipped are law enforcement agencies to recognize and respond to anti-Semitic incidents, particularly those affecting the elderly Jewish population?
So that depends on which area. In areas such as South Florida, like Dade County, I would say that the law enforcement is, again, like you said, Senator, we do a lot of education to educate them. We could do a lot more. Many times across the state, in different states, I find it to be that if they would know more, they would be able to do a much better job. And we simply, again, comes back to what you were saying, to everything else, we need to educate. The last time we did the 47-minute Hamas raw footage video, we did it through the state, and some people wanted to see it, some people were not that interested in seeing it. The ones who saw it said, now we understand.
Ms. Federman, what are some challenges that organizations like yours have, what you face when tracking threats to the community through the deep, dark web?
I would say that our biggest challenge is the volume of threats that we come across on a regular basis. We are reviewing thousands of alerts that we get with our tools that could indicate a life-threatening instance, and we have to consider every single one as a potential threat. And it's not just the deep and dark web, it's also the surface web, X, Facebook, Instagram, et cetera. The threats are incredibly pervasive, and the biggest impediment is having the ability to go through all of them.
Do the social media sites, are they helpful?
Not directly. For our purposes, right? We're looking for the threats. We're not inherently engaging with them to remove anti-Semitic content. we're focused on, as I mentioned, that very specific high threshold of I'm going to go commit violence rather than general anti-Semitic speech.
Do you have the, does your law enforcement have the tools to be able to stop it?
Yes. We are very, very fortunate to work very closely, both the local level, at the precinct level, with the NYPD intelligence teams, with the New York State Police, and with our FBI partners, and they have been incredibly responsive in working to mitigate threats and in working with us, because they know that if we are elevating something to them, it could be imminent.
It's hard to believe. It's just, you know, it's when you, it's just hard to believe people do it, right? It just doesn't, it doesn't make sense. None of this makes any sense, right? So,
Right.
Senator Kim.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Mr. Schaecter, I wanted to just start with just saying thank you to you for just such an extraordinarily powerful testimony. Just grateful for you. I wish I was able to bring my 2 boys to be able to come and meet you and hear from you about your story, and I'll be making sure that they see your testimony. You know, when I was in college, I did extensive Holocaust studies there. I actually wrote my undergraduate thesis about the Holocaust. And I do think that we need to be doing more to be able to invest in that type of education with our youth here in the United States at this time. And the threat that you said, it's not just about what happened during the Holocaust and World War II, but what we've seen since October 7th. You know, I just about an hour, I guess a little over an hour ago, just got off the phone again with Idon Alexander's parents, talking to them directly about just the concern, the fear that they feel. And I can tell you how impactful that is to the Jewish American community in my home state of New Jersey, and just how fearful it's not theoretical. They feel it on a visceral daily level. And then with Idon Alexander's captivity still very much at the forefront of their minds. One thing that you said, Mr. Schaecter, I wanted to ask this actually to Congressman Deutch, because it was something that really stuck out to me. I wasn't going to ask about this, but you know, he said that thousands of survivors of the Holocaust who need help, and that really stuck out to me, because as we're talking about this on the Committee of Aging, you know, Congressman Deutch, there's a part of our government agency, the Administration for Community Living. I'm not sure how familiar you are with them, but they have a program called the Holocaust Survivor Assistance Program, something that I worry right now that is very much under risk because there has been this reorganization at HHS, the termination of the Administration for Community Living. Is this something that you're tracking? Is there a real concern that this could very well take away resources from elderly Holocaust survivors in their time of need, as Mr. Schaecter pointed out?
Senator Kim, yes, we're tracking it very closely. But I can't let the moment pass to express appreciation, not just for your advocacy for the Alexander family, but for speaking about it here. The number of people have stopped me on my way in, thought that I had some garbage on my jacket. It's a piece of tape that has the number of days now, 572 days that Hamas has held hostages, in 59 hostages, including Americans, including Idon Alexander. Everyone like you, Chairman Scott, has been a hero on this issue. Your voices in speaking out makes their stories real for everyone and keeps up the pressure to help bring them home. I wanted to thank you for that. And yes, David's right. The Holocaust Survivor Assistance Program is a critically important program. And are we tracking? Yes. And all of our advocacy around this issue is very straightforward. This is a program that takes care of those whose needs are great and whose histories demand that we be there for them so that we can help them live out their lives in dignity. And any changes that would result in cutting back on funding, any changes that would impede the ability to ensure that mission that I think we all have in caring for seniors and for survivors in particular, is something that we should all work to prevent. And so I very much appreciate you raising this. It's a vitally important issue, and we have to stand together. to ensure.
I wanted to make sure it didn't just fall by the wayside. And Mr. Chairman, I hope we can follow up on this, because I think it's really at the intersection between elderly in this country, anti-Semitism, Holocaust, supporting Holocaust survivors. Congressman, it was already talked about the nonprofit security grant program. I'm on the Homeland Security Committee. I'm doing everything I can to be able to protect that as there's conversations about abolishing FEMA. I worry about the future of this. Yes, we want to preserve it. We want to increase the funds. But one thing I also hear is that, from the synagogues, the temples that I talk to, it's not just one-off security that they need. This is not just something where, they can have a capital project, increase security 1 year. This is the top budget item for every single synagogue, every single year, right? So like how do we try to think about this in terms of persistent support? Not just like a one-off grant that it's important that they get that, but for them to get a nonprofit security grant project, once out of every X number of years, it's not enough, right? Like I just feel like there's something we need to do to be able to help with that persistent cause.
Well, there's a lot that we need to do. I would just say that what my fellow panelist here spoke so clearly to is how urgent the needs are. And the chairman was exactly right. Senator Kim, for those of us, all of us on this panel, for people who care about these issues and focus on them like the chairman and like you do, we know, Senator Alston-Brooks, we know that the challenges are enormous. But when you take a step back, as the chairman said, it's not normal that every Jewish institution in America, every single one, worries about the physical safety of the people who come through their doors, kids, seniors, people coming to synagogue to pray. That isn't normal. So yes, we have to focus on funding, but it's ultimately the reason why this whole hearing is so important, why the fight against anti-Semitism needs to be waged by everyone across government and
speak
again,
up. Everybody's got to speak up.
Everyone has to speak up.
Everybody.
Chairman Scott, when there can be zero tolerance for anti-Semitism. When you hear something from, in your case, from a constituent, when we hear something from a neighbor, when we know something is said that isn't wrong, that isn't right, that it's based in anti-Semitic tropes, that it's meant to stir up anti-Semitism, we all have an obligation to call it out, just as we would against any other kind of hatred, because anti-Semitism never stops with the Jews, not in America, not in any country throughout history.
Yeah. It's just the beginning. It's an attack against other people. It's just pure hatred.
And it builds within people the trauma that they carry as well, but just, it gets so pervasive. I mean, especially for the parents I talk to in New Jersey, just fear every single day about their kids and their well-being, and it just continues the cycle.
And they're trying to force these Jewish day schools to be shut down. They're trying to scare people that they shouldn't send their kids there, and so to try to kill Jewish religion. Yeah. I mean, it's just ongoing.
Well,
Mr.
thank you,
Schaecter,
Chairman.
did you want to say something real quick?
Yes, I am almost embarrassed to make this question or answer it. Not every survivor is a college graduate. I'm a college graduate. I have benefited in this country because the opportunity, they didn't ask me what synagogue or what church I belonged to. They accepted me because I was told to take a test and take another test. And sure enough, I was accepted. And sure enough, I graduated. And sure enough, I did that when this thing called the high-tech world became here in America like no other place on earth. And I was in that place called America. And I was given a job because my graduation was in the field of high tech, and high tech was the world. And I was there, and I, God Almighty, was so lucky.
Thank you. Senator Kim, did you have anything else?
No, thank you, Chairman. I appreciate it. Thank you for pulling this hearing together.
Senator Also Brooks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much as well to all who have come today to testify at this hearing. I want to begin by underscoring what I'm sure all of my colleagues have already shared today, and that is that anti-Semitism is a real and rising threat, not only in my state, Maryland, but it's rising throughout our country. And any act of hate or form of discrimination is unacceptable and absolutely must be condemned. According to the Anti-Defamation League in Maryland, we saw a 211% increase in anti-Semitic incidents in 2023, including harassment, vandalism, and even assault. And just last month, a Baltimore man was sentenced for setting fire outside the Jewish Museum in Maryland. And these acts are intended, as we know, to stoke fear, to stoke division, and they have no place in our state or in our country. Now, I want to thank Mr. Schaecter begin by thanking you so much, sir, for being here today. Your survival story, your lifelong commitment to educating others is powerful. It is inspiring. We're really, really honored to have you here today. I just have a couple of quick questions. One of them is I'm a baby of the 70s. I was born in 1971 to be exact. And at the time that I was born on the edge of the civil rights movement. One of the things I can tell you happened routinely in my family as we sat at the kitchen table and had dinner each night was there was a very real discussion about the civil rights movement and the fact the African American community and the Jewish community were friends and allies, and that we would not have seen the successes that we did except for that allyship. And so I'd like to ask you, because I know that American Jews and Black civil rights leaders have long worked together in the struggle against discrimination in this country, how does finding shared values and building relationships across communities help to combat hate, and how does it make our larger community safer?
Senator Alsworks, I'm happy to jump in.
Sure, thank you.
It's a really important question, and the importance of recognizing fundamentally that we're all in this together in America. It's the story of our nation, and what you describe and the history of the civil rights movement speaks powerfully to that realization. It's the reason that there were so many in the Jewish community who recognized the importance of standing up during the civil rights movement, understanding that discrimination against one group ultimately holds everyone down. Yep. As we fast forward to where we are today, it's very much consistent with the exchange that we had just a moment ago about how anti-Semitism, the world's oldest hate, which for thousands of years has plagued the Jewish community, when it rises up as it has, when there is so much misinformation, when there are so many threats, there too is the opportunity for the rest of the community to stand with the Jewish community, to push back against this hatred, to push back against these lies, and to help set the record straight for the very same reason that coming together during the civil rights movement, as you pointed out, was so critical. Coming together in the fight against anti-Semitism is so critically important at this moment.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Congressman, the Administration for Community Living has invested nearly $5 million annually in a 5-year initiative with the Jewish Federations of North America to expand person-centered trauma-informed services for Holocaust survivors and other older adults with histories of trauma. And this program has supported 15,000 survivors and trained more than 10,000 professionals nationwide. Altogether, the Administration for Community Living ensures that older adults and people with disabilities can live in their communities with dignity, security, and the independence that they deserve. Congressman, you used to represent a district with a large senior population, and I wonder if you might just be able to highlight, I know I'm running out of time, how disrupting the services provided to seniors, including Jewish seniors, harm our most vulnerable communities.
Well, thank you, Senator Elsa-Brooks. It's very much, as you point out, it's the issue of not just need, but trauma and what it means when we have this moment, this last moment to ensure that the now small number of survivors can live out their lives in dignity. That means not having to revisit trauma. That means having the wherewithal to be able to celebrate their remaining years with their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And it means making sure that the means to do that aren't ripped away from them. And it's a really important point that you make, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Congressman, we've seen disturbing instances where individuals, including licensed healthcare workers, have made threats online, which is shocking, right? Implying that they would deny care or provide substandard treatment to Jewish patients. How would you respond to threats like these, particularly when they come from individuals in the positions of public trust like the healthcare sector?
Chairman Scott,
it's hard to believe, right?
Right, and it starts, again, with no tolerance for it. When someone makes clear that, let's just be clear about one thing. As Rebecca said just a little while ago, what we've seen, especially online, is the willingness to determine that somehow it's acceptable to just replace the word Jew with Zionist, that just as people will acknowledge they can't get away with saying online or anywhere else that Jews aren't welcome, that Jews can't come, that Jews should be killed, that somehow when it comes to Zionists, and again, let's be clear, for the Jewish community, for the vast majority of Jews, Israel isn't just a country they care about, it's central to their religious identity, to their identity as part of the Jewish people. And so when they're told by a doctor or someone whose trust we need to count on, that they're not going to be accepted if they're Zionists, then they're being told that Jews can't come. And it's one of the reasons why we at AJC, we work with the social media companies to make sure that they understand that when you simply take Israel and Zionism and you put it in the place of Jew in order to fulfill the desires of the anti-Semites who are doing it, that they have a role to play to make sure that doesn't happen. And that's exactly what we need to impress upon them.
So if, let's say, in South Florida, a healthcare worker at a hospital, name whatever hospital down there, said, put out online, if it's a Jewish patient, I'm going to give them substandard care. What should everybody in the community do?
By the way, as you know, not everyone goes to a hospital voluntarily, Senator Scott, and the idea that there may be professionals who have said that if a patient comes in, that their care will be different, will be lesser, or will be shunned aside altogether because they happen to be Jewish, then that can't be tolerated. It wouldn't be tolerated if someone made a comment like that about any other group, and I would think that the hospital, the practice, would take action to ensure that person can't carry out those anti-Semitic desires.
So let's take Miami. How many people live in Miami?
I'm going to turn to my Dade County friends.
How many people live in Miami-Dade?
Miami-Dade County has 2.9 million residents.
2.9 million people.
That's not counting our tourism.
If a hospital in Miami-Dade had a healthcare worker that said that they were going to give Jews a substandard care, and 10,000 people sent a letter to the CEO of the hospital, what do you think would happen?
I would expect that I would certainly expect that if someone on the hospital staff made a statement like that that was publicized and confirmed to be accurate, and people complained about it, that the hospital would want to take action on behalf of the entire hospital and all of the patients that it sees.
Right. But that's an example of what everybody could do, whether you're Jewish or not. Yeah. All right. Thanks. Thank you all. I want to thank everybody for all of our witnesses for being here today, sharing your powerful stories and expertise. The rising tide of anti-Semitism in this country is a dire threat to the safety and dignity of our elderly Jewish population and to all Americans. We have a moral obligation to protect those who are most vulnerable, especially those who have survived the unimaginable horrors of the Holocaust. Every action we take today can make a difference. Every law we pass, every policy we implement, every conversation we have brings us one step closer to ensuring that our elderly Jewish Americans, our parents, our grandparents, and Holocaust survivors can live in peace and security. I look forward to working with my colleagues to advance solutions that will make a real impact in combating anti-Semitism and protecting Jewish seniors. And I personally do not understand why anybody has an anti-Jewish statement. It floors me. We will keep the record open for additional questions and statements from senators until next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Thank you all for being here. This meeting's adjourned.